Welcome back to Education Joining the Dots. We are GL Assessment or GL Education, depending on where you are in the world, a Renaissance company committed to delving into the most pressing topics in education and assessment. In this episode, we're exploring a topic that affects millions of children. We're delving into the critical issues surrounding speech, language, and communication, and how this impacts educational journeys for teachers and for their students. I'm your host, Georgina Cook, Education Specialist for Language and Literacy and former English lead across a multi-academy trust in the UK. Speech and Language UK report that 1 in 5 children are struggling with talking and understanding words, and the Oracy Commission point out that this means almost 2 million children in the UK were not at the expected level for language and communication by the end of reception. 2 years on, we wanted to see if teachers thought speech and language problems were as widespread, and if they were, what was causing them. Our recent Lost for Words report surveyed over 1,000 UK teachers who revealed that up to 40% of students have speech and language issues, worsening over the past 5 years. Teachers blame reduced conversation at home, increased screen time, and less reading. Speech and language barriers impact learning, well-being, behaviour, and attendance. Teachers across the UK are struggling with these challenges every day, which are often misunderstood by the public and by parents. Joining me today is Rachael Symons, Reading Lead and Primary English Lead at Cabot Learning Federation. Join us as we uncover the realities of poor speech, language and communication skills in our schools and see what we can do to support every child's right to a successful education. Welcome, Rachael. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start by just introducing yourself, if that's all right, and what your role is at the moment.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Rachael Symons. I'm Reading Lead and Primary English Lead for Cabot Learning Federation. We're a large trust of 35 settings based in the southwest of England. I work as part of the school improvement team, which supports all of our schools, adults and learners. So we have primary schools, secondaries, post-16, alternative and specialist provision, and we cater for children from the age of 2 to 19.
Lovely, thank you. Well, we really appreciate your time today. It sounds like you're a very busy lady with all of those children to look after. So in our recent Lost for Words report, teachers reported that up to 40% of students may have speech and language issues. And teachers believe that these skills have probably worsened since 2020 or since the pandemic. So I just wonder, Rachael, how prevalent these issues are across your multi-academy trust and what trends you've observed over the past few years.
Absolutely. We're certainly aware that there continues to be a growing number of speech and language needs apparent in early years and throughout other year groups in education. We know that the pandemic has impacted on this, but so too has the increasingly difficult financial situations that many parents find themselves in. Many parents working more than one job in order to put food on the table, and they don't always have the time or the headspace to be able to narrate what they're doing, for example, in order to support their child's oracy. We also know that there's been a decline in the traditional childhood of playing, whether that's alone or with others too, and that more time is spent by children on screens instead of with each other, both indoors and outdoors, and playing games. Given all of that as well, it's also apparent that as a profession, we're now more aware than ever before of speech and language needs. We're now more knowledgeable about them, and we're certainly becoming more effective at supporting our young people to communicate better and to be more confident in themselves as good communicators.
Yeah, and I think that's really key, isn't it? Because I know if I spoke about speech and language and communication 10 years ago, we might be talking about early years provision, but actually this is just as prevalent in post-16 all the way through secondary. I know you mentioned that your role covers age 3 all the way through to 19. And we certainly see that oracy development is really important and crucial, and all teachers are really buying into that now, aren't they?
Yes, definitely.
How do you ensure then that oracy development is really effective across that age range and across all of the schools within your trust?
So, for us in Cabot Learning Federation, equity through education is a thread that's woven through all that we do. We intentionally have a curriculum that goes beyond the national curriculum. We believe that our pupils need and deserve that as part of their educational journey. And we know that being literate which obviously involves oracy, reading and writing, enables students to access our challenging and highly aspirational curriculum. We say that every child has the right to be literate and that every adult in our schools has the responsibility to make this happen. But in order to ensure that the adults in our schools are enacting that responsibility, we make sure that through high quality professional development, these adults understand and are able to provide strong teaching of literacy within all of their lessons. So regardless of the age, phase and subject being taught, because teachers need to know what effective literacy teaching looks like and what effective oracy teaching sounds like. And they need to know how to develop it for all of the students that they teach. So oracy is woven through our teaching and learning frameworks, and it is given the prominence in academy improvement plans that it absolutely deserves. But in addition to that, and in addition to our trust-wide working and the oracy network that we have, we also engage with outside agencies. So Voice 21 is an organisation that many of our schools have worked with, but all schools within our trust are developing oracy, whether they're working with Voice 21 or not. There's an oracy lead in each of our settings who attends regular trust-wide network meetings where research is shared and discussed. Good practices are explored, and colleagues have opportunities to share what is working well in their setting, as well as to explore the challenges that they're facing so that they can be supported by their peers. But in each case, evidence and research-based professional development ensures that PD is as effective as it can be.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really hearing there that it is definitely for you a strategic goal, and that oracy is front and foremost in schools. And it sounds kind of going back to basics sometimes, doesn't it? That we need to make sure that children can speak, listen, read and write to access curriculum. But actually, it is about really sitting back and thinking about, well, what does that look like in our school for our children? What do we need to provide them with in terms of skills so that they can access what they're learning, but also be happy in school?
Absolutely.
So just moving on from that then, if we think about that wider impact that oracy has, what's the impact for you, for example, on behaviour and attendance following this development of oracy and that strategic goal across your schools?
So we know that enabling young people to have a voice and for them to have that voice heard supports the development of their senses of status, belonging and esteem. We know that if young people struggle to communicate effectively and appropriately with their voice, many will communicate in other ways, often through challenging behaviour. And that can be anything from the annoying pencil tapping to the other extreme, sort of chair throwing and, potentially fighting with other children in the classroom. And an example I can give you, one of our schools, which has gone from being a struggling school to one which is now thriving, absolutely credits the development of oracy across the curriculum with playing a significant part in its journey to being such a successful school. So the word used by the principal was that oracy has been transformative for his pupils, because not only has behaviour dramatically improved, but so too has attendance and outcomes. The pupils want to attend that school because they feel valued there, they feel heard, and they know that they have a voice. And not only do pupils and their parents now feel more valued themselves, they also value the education more that is being provided. And so because pupils attend more, they feel more valued, and so it goes on. I mean, across our trust, if we were to average the attendance of our students at schools which have engaged with Voice 21 work over the past few years and compare it to our trust average, it would definitely be higher for those who have engaged in Voice 21. So we're not saying that there's a direct causational link here between oracy and attendance, but there is definitely a correlation.
That's amazing, isn't it? Because what we're really saying there then, and is really important, that it's not just about speaking. We're talking about that listening skills, aren't we? And really feeling heard and valued. And that really comes through in your answer there. So thank you for that. So let's just think about then understanding need, because we've talked about what the wider impact is if we get it right. But how do you know when students are with you what that need is? How do you identify whether there is a speech language communication or an oracy need across your schools?
I mean, our identification of a speech and language issue is early on is absolutely key. And we're looking through the work of our Trust Send lead. We're looking at aligning some of our assessment procedures to support our aim of delivering inclusive excellence whilst meeting need. So our schools have previously used different speech and language screeners. Many of our schools have signed up to welcome from GL. And we're currently looking at how best to align these assessments in order to generate a higher level of consistency and understanding across our schools. In addition to this, all students, regardless of age, should be supported to communicate effectively about different subjects, but also about their emotions and feelings. And so oracy development needs to happen for all. I was having a conversation recently with a colleague who has a specific mental health and wellbeing remit, and she delivered a workshop recently with some of our post-16 students, and she asked them what was in their mental health first aid kit. So what do they do to support their mental health? And they all spoke about talking with friends, talking with family to express their feelings and emotions. One student even spoke about being able to cry in order to release his emotions. But there was a definite sense from that conversation that these post-16 students were absolutely thrilled to actually be able to talk about how they do look after themselves and how they do look after their mental health, because previously they haven't necessarily all had the opportunities to do so.
Yeah, and that's so important, is it? We really need to remember that actually some children don't get that modelling at home. They don't get that opportunity to actually just speak about their feelings. I love the phrase you used with inclusive excellence. I think that's really powerful in terms of thinking about speech, language, oracy. We are really enabling children or empowering children to have that inclusivity, that they are able to express themselves, they're able to be heard in a safe space. And I think when I've ever done anything to do with oracy in school, sometimes it's a bit scary because you are kind of putting the reins over to the children to talk, but giving them the space and the freedom to do that is absolutely crucial. It's a life skill. It's not just something we're doing in school with them.
No, absolutely, definitely.
So you talked about some examples there of how the impact with children. What do your pupils just in general think of this increased time that they have to talk in schools? Do you have any feedback on that?
So we have some pupil voice from some of our schools, and we know that in developing oracy within our schools, we know we're empowering our young people to talk effectively and to learn through talk too. In a recent survey at one of our secondary schools, results show that there's a huge increase in students who value talking with classmates as a way of learning. And pupil voice from our primary schools indicates that pupils really and genuinely value being heard. They value being listened to. So knowing that what they have said has value. So primary pupils predominantly they haven't necessarily spoken about them being able to communicate well, but they have spoken about them being heard and them being listened to. And we know that that is a result of them being able to communicate well.
And it is in all different situations as well, isn't it? Because we often think about the jump between Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 2 to Key Stage 3 in terms of academic vocabulary, understanding, knowledge of language. But we also talk about the complexity of relationships with peers and this kind of social time, also kind of scaffolding that up when we go from Key Stage 1 to 2 to 3. So that's really interesting. Thank you. I'm just wondering then, because part of this survey talked about not a resistance or a reluctance from teachers, but maybe a concern about how giving more time to oracy might impact on other priorities and other educational goals. So have you seen any of that across your mat? How has the development of oracy impacted on other areas of school life for you?
So there's sort of two parts to that question, really, aren't there? And in that you reference sort of initial teacher reservations, perhaps. We certainly heard some initial teacher reservations when we first started exploring in-depth developing oracy within our schools. And then as teachers learned and developed their own knowledge of understanding around oracy and speech and language and communication, they became skilled themselves in terms of developing oracy, and many of their reservations definitely diminished because, like you say, you're handing over the reins of your lesson to the children in the classroom. And we know what amazing young people, children and teenagers are, and they can take things off in a range of different directions. But because of the professional development that is put in place, teachers have been upskilled in order to guide and structure those conversations. And so those reservations have definitely diminished. They definitely diminished quite rapidly. In terms of other areas of the curriculum, and I'm going to talk specifically about other areas of literacy, being able to talk through ideas before putting pen to paper is incredibly useful. Staff voice from one of our secondary schools indicates that 86% of staff believe that oracy strategies had supported students to complete higher quality extended pieces of writing. This level of collaborative learning and talking to each other and sharing ideas takes us back to the theories posited by Vygotsky, who emphasised that our communication tools are critical for cognitive development because they help shape the way individuals understand and interact with the world. So group activities and peer interactions enable learners to share ideas and perspectives, which both enhance cognitive development. With regards to reading, the use of oracy makes reading a sociable activity. So pupils are able to share what they've learned, what they've enjoyed, what they agree and disagree with from what they have read. And we each bring a different perspective to any text that we read because we all bring our own experiences, our own knowledge and understanding of vocabulary and our own level of interest in the context that we're reading about. And so being able to share our views about this is incredibly powerful and empowering. And an example of that I'd like to share with you, if I may. I visited one of our schools, and this was many years ago, and I went to one of their library lessons. And at that time, their library lessons were conducted in silence. I did some student voice and asked one boy what his favourite part of the lesson was. And he said, it's the end. He said, but not for the reason that you think, not because it is the end of the lesson. He said, it's because when I walk out of the library and down the corridor, I can finally talk with my friends about what we've been reading about. And so because of that feedback from him, their library lessons now incorporate time for students to share their thoughts and ideas without them needing to wait until they're in the corridor. So being able to share and express views and how a text has made us feel and what a text has made us think about when we've been reading it is really, really powerful and really important for pupils of all ages.
Yeah, I love that, because what I'm hearing there are those kind of shared experiences are allowing, I think just that kind of articulation of thinking is just really important when we're trying to make sense of the world and we're trying to make sense of what we've seen or what we've read. And we've all been there, haven't we? I've been there where I think, because my class are quiet, then I'm doing really well. Behaviour's brilliant in this classroom. But actually, it's about growing in confidence to allow children to actually have that time and that space to really think about and have a chance to articulate their feelings.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Rachel. You've really shared some really golden nuggets of examples there and how you've been using oracy to really impact the young people across your trust. I think some of the key things that have really resonated with me is that it's absolutely brilliant that we're in a position now where we have really kind of seen as a profession the value and the impact that giving time to oracy and language and speech and language development is for children, but also for staff too, because you did speak at the beginning about providing that strong literacy teaching across the age range being a strategic goal, and that you've seen across your colleagues that growing confidence and understanding from teachers at how impactful that knowledge can be and powerful it can be in the classroom. You then talked about oracy in one of your schools, the head talking about it just being transformative in the way that they're approaching teaching. And one of the phrases that you used today that I loved was this inclusive excellence. And I think that's really resonated with me because the impact on mental health, on well-being, you talked about the value that children feel when they're being really heard in school so that they come to school and they feel valued and they know they belong. We've got a huge problem at the moment, haven't we, with behaviour and with attendance. And it's a really, really crucial step for children to come into the building. Some of them, that's a really hard thing for them to do. And I sometimes think we forget some of that because we talk about academic performance in terms of literacy. Let's make sure children are literate so they can access curriculum. But what you've said today really shows the much wider stretch and wider impact that being literate can have on a young person. You use words like engaging and empowering. And I just love that because if we're not given time to read, listen, think about other people's ideas, understand different perspectives, we can't possibly be engaged and critical in learning. I've been in lots of talks recently about AI and the future of education. I was in something yesterday about how easy it is for children to do their homework now because they can just put the questions into ChatGPT and the answers are going on in the background. But actually what you're talking about today is really crucial with all of that because we're really teaching children to really think about what they think and be critical and responsive and have their own opinion and their own voice. So have you got any final words before we wrap up today?
I mean, when a school improves, we know that there are a range of things in place that support better attendance. We know that there's a clear reason and rationale for pupils to come in every day because it is a place where they feel that they belong, as you say, and are listened to. So oracy is one of the strategies that we use in our trust to support pupils to have a voice. It's part of our school and trust improvement strategy. We're definitely a work in progress across our schools, but a range of measures from attendance figures and student outcomes to student and staff voice indicates that we're heading in the right direction.
That's brilliant, Rachel. Thank you so much. And I know how busy you are, so we really, really appreciate your time today. I'm sure listeners got lots of value from that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to our lightbulb moment. This is the part of our podcast where we share your stories and uncover the true power of data. Whether you're already confident using your assessments or looking to discover something new, these moments are all about learning and collaboration with colleagues. In this episode, we're hearing from Susanne Humpage, Developing Local Provision Project Facilitator at the Eastwards Consortium in Birmingham.
Susanne Humpage, DLP Project for the Eastwards Consortium in the northeast of Birmingham. One of my favourite experiences with Welcome comes from when I was modelling an intervention for the early years section 4. My group consisted of 4 nursery children and the activity we were working on was section 4.4, learning to talk through play. As I was being observed by a teaching assistant, the session took place in a room away from the nursery unit, so we had some peace and quiet. For resources, I had a play tea set and a wooden pizza with a serving slice and some plates. I started with all of the resources in the middle of the table and we all labelled the objects and talked briefly about what we were going to do, so the children had the language to talk about the activity. I could see the children were desperate to start playing, so I let them use the resources independently and played alongside them, letting the children talk as much as they wanted and modelling languages at intervals. The intervention was only supposed to last a maximum of 15 minutes, but after 20 minutes the TA said she needed to take the children back to class as it was time to get ready for dinner. On returning to the room, the TA was amazed. "I can't believe Alex, he did nothing but talk." "Well, doesn't he do that usually? We had a great conversation while we were making tea," I replied. "He rarely talks in the unit," said the TA. "We discussed why we thought Alex had been so chatty and wondered whether it was because he was so engaged in the activity or if it was being away from some of the other children who were more confident and had allowed Alex to participate more." When I returned to the unit a few weeks later, the TA confirmed that following regular intervention sessions, Alex had become more confident and was now approaching adults regularly to discuss things and complete activities together. This just shows the power of Welcome.
That's it for this episode of Education Joining the Dots. A huge thank you to Rachael Symons for sharing her experience. Hopefully her thought-provoking ideas and her experience have given you all some insights to help you reframe the challenges of speech and language in your own contexts. Our Lost for Words report is out now and it can be found on our website at gl-assessment.co.uk. For those of you looking for more information about any of our assessments or to help support identification, please head to our training and support site support.gl-assessment.co.uk or support.gl-education.com, depending on where you are in the world. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please feel free to share more about it by tweeting us using the handle @gl_assessment or @gl_education. We'd love to hear more from you and to receive your contributions, so please do email us at podcast@gl-assessment.co.uk. Or you can send us a WhatsApp voice note to 07917 516 515. We'll be back again in May as we continue to join the education dots. But in the meantime, look out for a new episode of the Renaissance Space podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hello, it's GL here. We would love to hear your views on the Education Joining the Dots podcast, and we'd be very grateful if you could take a few minutes of your time to give us your feedback by following the link to our survey. You'll find this in the episode description on your device, and all feedback is welcome as it will help us to ensure that this podcast meets your needs.